So if you didn't see, Wormgod's Crust got a buff this season to make it much more usable. Although the damage didn't actually change, it's always had absolutely absurd melee damage, and it's been more than Synthoceps even before they got nerfed. But now that they have been nerfed, it's an even better option. Now, without a doubt, the way that it's been made now makes it much more forgiving to use, and I highly recommend it for a lot of situations where you would have been using Synthoceps instead. So let's go ahead and hop into how it actually works, and when you should be using it over Synthoceps. So having a look at the description here, we'll see essentially getting a kill gives you a stack of Burning Fists, which increases your melee damage by a certain amount. You can get up to 5 stacks, and at that point you get a 275% melee damage buff. To put it in perspective, Banner of War gives you 40%, 1-2 Punch gives you 150% against bosses, and Synthoceps now gives you 165% just by being surrounded. So it is pretty much the highest single melee damage buff in the game right now, and with the new changes, it actually can maintain that buff for an entire 10 seconds without any kills. So you can genuinely use this for an actual amount of time in boss DPS, whereas before you only had 3 or 4 seconds to do the damage with it, which made it much harder to use. So this exotic's actual niche is pretty much going to be more effort for more damage compared to Synthoceps now. However, the effort is now a realistic amount to still get increased damage, whereas it really wasn't before. So a lot of people have been doing solo 1 phases on dungeon bosses that just weren't really possible to do that with before, or it was close with Synthoceps. They're doing it now. I'm pretty sure every single boss from the new dungeon has already been solo 1 phased by Wormgod's Strand Titan, so it is definitely an insane setup. Now, if you've never done the Strand Titan melee setup before to get all the damage out, I'll go ahead and run through that. It's actually really simple to do, it's one of the easier things to do, and it is very powerful. So essentially, you're going to want to have Tractor Cannon either from yourself or from a teammate, and a 1-2 punch shotgun. It also helps to have a Navigator for a grapple point, or just to be able to set up a tangle from an enemy nearby whatever you're trying to damage. Assuming you're doing this solo, which most people likely are, the easiest setup is probably going to be to use a charged melee on an ad to spawn a tangle, tractor the boss, shoot him with 1-2 punch, and use up your frenzied blades. Then after that, start doing a 1-2 punch shotgun and then grapple, and just repeatedly shoot him with the shotgun and do a grapple melee over and over. Every grapple melee is going to do well over 500,000 damage, even to an unshielded target. It is absolutely insane, and again, this will solo 1 phase a lot of dungeon bosses just by spamming this one move. So it's super simple and it's very effective. Now, before we get into the build, I wanted to quickly say thank you to everybody who's been supporting the channel. It's been absolutely amazing lately, and we're actually getting close to 1,000 subscribers. So if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, like, comment, all that, and if you really like me, go back and watch my old videos. It shows that you like me, and I'd really appreciate it. Anyways, without further ado, let's get to the build. And next up, I wanted to quickly run through the actual Strand Titan build that you would be using for this, because it is somewhat specific in the aspects and the abilities. However, the fragments can be pretty flexible, so let's look at that. First of all, we're just going to use our standard wall, the only melee, the best jump in the game, catapult lift, that's right, and of course the grapple grenade, since it is also a melee, which is what we're of course building into. For the aspects, we're going to be using it into the fray. This will give us melee regenerate whenever we have Woven Mail, which we're going to have a lot of, and it also lets us get Woven Mail very easily. And of course, we're going to have Banner of War for the melee damage increase and the survivability. Now right here, we're going to have Thread of Warding. This is just to get more melees and more Woven Mails. This is Thread of Continuity. I like this really just to extend the Sever effect, because when you're slapping the shit out of a boss with melee, it helps to have them doing less damage to you with Sever. And of course, since the Strand Titan melee applies Sever, this will last for a little longer. This is definitely the most optional one if you wanted to have something else, so feel free to switch it out. Then we have Thread of Ascent. This one is relatively important because it will reload your 1-2 punch shotgun automatically while you're doing the repeated grapple melees, and you don't want to run out of shotgun ammo and have to reload while you're doing your rotation, of course, so I definitely recommend using this. It's really an amazing fragment for any Strand build. And finally, of course, Thread of Generation. This is again just for roaming, helps you get your grapple back more often so you can use it more. Very good stuff. And of course, there are a couple of mods I definitely recommend having on as well. I recommend having a Siphon mod for whatever ag clear weapon you're using. In this case, I was using a Stasis Waveframe, so I put on a Stasis Siphon, and the Hands-On mod to get our super back more quickly. On the topic of supers, if you're using Wormgod's Crest, it does not actually buff super damage or even get stacks off of the super, despite it still kind of being a melee. So I don't actually really recommend building into your super much and only really using it for ag clear. However, if you're doing this setup with Synthoceps, of course your super is going to get the crazy damage buff that Synthoceps gives it. On the gauntlets themselves, the big thing to do is heavy-handed. That way your melee kills spawn orbs, which will give you woven mail and give you more melees. So definitely very helpful here. This will also help keep you alive in harder content. And on grapple builds especially, this is amazing because whenever you do a grapple melee, it counts as a melee. So you will actually get your grenade back for using your grenade. This is basically like a kickstart without needing any armor charge. And finally, I just use this. This is just an extra. I like to switch it out for harmonic dexterity sometimes if I'm using a Strand 1-2 punch shotgun. It just depends on the setup. Not a big deal, but just an extra slot here. You could even just double down on this if you wanted to. It's a flexible slot. You'll pretty much want to have a 1-2 punch shotgun of some kind. There are a lot of different choices for what you take. Pretty much, I recommend a lightweight or a rapid fire frame. I personally prefer rapid fire frames because they just hold more ammo. The Deicide here actually has 25 ammo in the reserves without any mods on. You just have 25 rounds, whereas a lightweight only gets 15. So it's just much more forgiving on your ammo, especially for something long. Maybe if you're soloing coil or something like that, it can definitely help out. However, it is worth noting that a lightweight shotgun typically has a lot more handling and will ready quicker after you do your melee attack, allowing you to do them quicker. So there's benefits to both. You're also going to want to have tractor cannon or a teammate using tractor cannon. Typically, if you're on a team and you're the Strand Titan, you'll be put on tractor because you don't really need to have a heavy weapon, whereas most other people would need to have a heavy weapon to deal damage. And finally, we have the Navigator. Essentially, this is able to make grapple points on demand. So if you're in a situation where you don't conveniently have an enemy to turn into a tangle next to a boss, you can put a grapple point above his head and then quick swap back to tractor him, and then do your damage. Or of course you can have a teammate use this, especially if you have two Strand Titans. One of you can be Navigator, one of you can be Tractor. It's very easy. So definitely a great weapon here for the kit. And that's going to be it for the video. If you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching the whole thing, and make sure you're subscribed, to like, and leave a comment with your thoughts below. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye.